Y'all, some films are just everything that is wrong with modern horror. Others just are kind of so mediocre that you forget them the moment that they're over. But every once in a while, you come across a horror film that reminds you why you slog through all of the generic slop to find like a single shining pearl of like tension and dread and actual good jump scares. His House is one of those films, and it stands out because it does something extremely unique. So, on the surface, it is yet another haunted house movie. Married couple moves into a rundown home after a tragedy, only to be tormented by ghosts. And they can't just up and leave, right? So, why exactly is this film so much better than literally any other haunted house movie that has come out in honestly recent memory? We have seen so many examples of the haunted house where the family is being tormented, but they refuse to leave for way longer than is reasonable or sane, typically because they've sunk all of their money into the house, or because they have a really horrible case of over rationalizing poltergeists throwing knives at their heads as being some stress induced hallucination. Families are nearly always white, the beats are predictable, and the logic is always the same. Okay, so you may be asking, why does the race of the family matter? And it matters because people of different races, cultures, socioeconomic statuses, sexualities, nationalities all have different stories. Stories that, as a viewer, you've probably never seen before. And on the most surface level, that means a fresh take on an old trope, and that means a more interesting film. His House is so refreshing in this way. Yes, it's a haunted house story, but because they use a perspective that we're not used to seeing, it adds such a depth and complexity to the story. This is the first haunted house movie in a very long time where I did not, at some point in the film, roll my eyes. The characters didn't just up and leave the obviously haunted homicidal house. I really don't care if you have put your life savings into the house. If the bathtub keeps trying to drown your wife, it might be time to book an Airbnb. They are at least like 25% less dangerous. Okay, and this is bathroom number 2. How much did you say rent was again?
800 a month, including utilities.
I mean, it's got character. We can make it the guest bath.
Great. Hey, why don't we keep going? I can show you the other bedrooms.
Cool, yeah, absolutely. The main characters are a married couple from South Sudan seeking asylum in the UK after escaping a very bloody civil war. They stay in the house that's obviously haunted because they literally can't do anything else. These characters are not in denial about the haunting, but if they make a fuss about the haunting, there's a very real possibility that their asylum will be revoked and they'll be sent back to Sudan, which may as well be a death sentence for them. Also treated to a different folklore. This isn't just the spirits of the dead. There is something deeper at play here, and this folklore just permeates the entire story. The movie starts with a dream. People on a small boat in a terrible storm, and a drowning. And Bull wakes up next to his wife Rial in their holding cell, I guess you could call it, awaiting judgment on their bid for asylum. So Bull and Rial are summoned and taken through a hallway, passing a room where a man is like screaming and being wrestled to the ground by what looks like either guards or police or both. And the very next shot after this is a static shot in a mostly empty cafeteria. So, like, 3 board suits looking kind of sloppy, sitting quietly. One is on his phone, and the others are kind of mindlessly skimming paperwork. I thought this was a great setup because when the film cuts from the hallway tracking shot to this shot, it makes you think that this is the room that the main characters are going to be walking into. Then it cuts to our characters already seated. And suddenly the like boring silence is now in like oppressively awkward silence. We have no clue how long they've been sitting there, and they look so uncomfortable. Maybe more so when one suit asks about the child and is informed they lost her. This news of what must have been like a devastating loss to Rial and Bol is provided and received with the same gravitas one might have discussing their lunch order. The only emotion in the scene comes from Bol and Rial, and honestly, it's kind of unnerving. The bureaucrat tells them that they'll be released from the detention center on bail as asylum seekers, kind of like they are criminals. Bull cannot hide his relief and his joy. It really made my heart swell, really, to see the honest to God tears of joy welling in this man's eyes, despite the way they've been treated for what is probably the better part of the last year. And the suits don't so much as pretend to smile. They feel so lacking in basic human empathy that it sucks all of the joy from the room like a black hole. The official like rapid fire several details that almost seem intended to like harpoon Bowles' joy in the heart. And I want to pause for a moment to appreciate everything that just happened here. In under 5 minutes, we have set up an intriguing mystery. Why did Rial and Bull flee? Like, what happened to their daughter? It communicates Bull's trauma. He's obviously haunted by his daughter's death. It builds a sense of unease with the awkward silence and the police wrestling the man, treating them like they're criminals. It effectively communicates how desperate and scared Rial and Bull both are. Like, a man says they'll be shot, and their emotional reaction, it shows how little humanity they're viewed with. And it sets up very real stakes. Leaving the house is certain death. So they're given a place to live in a slum that they're told over and over again that they should be thankful for because it's so big. But the idea is kind of ridiculous because the house is in a terrible part of town. It's falling apart. It's infested with vermin, but thank God for the extra square footage, as though this is more desirable than this. It's just straight up gaslighting throughout the film, and one of many ways that they're treated horribly just for being asylum seekers.
Normally this would be half the size with twice as many of you in it, but this is all yours.
This shows, hey, actually, these guys have it better than most refugees, which is really distressing and very real. So there is a deep struggle they both face in assimilating. Bull is trying to like dive into the deep end, trying to accept their new home immediately to such an extreme degree that it's kind of painful. It's almost like he's running for something or trying to forget. Whereas Rial has the opposite reaction. She actively resists assimilation and deeply struggles with losing her home and adjusting to like this new life. And this starts to become a rift between them. Bull gets angry at her for not trying, and Rial resents him for throwing away their roots so easily. This is where their conflict kind of starts, but we've only really seen the surface of it. There is a much deeper and darker tension between them that we're going to see revealed throughout the film. And amid all of this complex maze of emotion, the strife, the racism, the grief, the PTSD flashbacks, the haunting starts. Bull begins to see Nyagak, their daughter, hiding in the walls, as well as another figure that stalks him throughout the house. Nyagak seems very aggressive towards him. First, it seems like maybe it's not a haunting. Like maybe it's just his PTSD and he's having hallucinations, flashbacks, things like that. But Rial has moments where it's clear she is also seeing ghosts. But her experiences are more somber and sad. She is completely unafraid, but she's also not being attacked. Things between them are getting more and more tense, and their individual actions become more and more weird. Like, Bull is trying too hard to assimilate, insisting that they adopt Western eating habits like using cutlery, even when they're alone in their own home. And Rial is very resistant to adapting, which is kind of wild when you consider the alternative. Then this happens.
They give you a chance here. We can start a family.
What a weird thing to say after losing a daughter. This prompts Rial to tell him a story.
There was once an honorable but poor man who wanted a home of his own. He wanted it so badly he began to steal from others.
He accidentally steals from an Apeth, a night witch. This means that when he built his home, the Apeth would live there too.
The dead would come. The Apeth would not stop until he had consumed the man entirely.
Rial says that an Apeth has risen from the ocean and followed them here.
Spoke to me.
Told her that they did not belong here and that if they left and repaid their debt, that it would guide them back to their daughter. Rial is obviously like grieving and heartbroken, but at this, Bull just loses his mind.
She's dead. Can't you? We have grieved enough. Enough.
So now it's like, what on earth does Rial think Bull stole? Is the thief allegory more metaphorical? She seems to think the Apeth is literal. So why is Bull so upset by Rial's grief? What exactly happened to make him feel so guilty that this is his response? It just does not match up. I really love the way that this is shot. The extreme close up, Bull's face mostly obscured by shadows, and Rial is looking directly at the camera as she calls him a liar. It's not a very complex shot, but it's extremely effective for what's going on. It just puts you right there with the characters. Nyagak comes back to terrorize Bull again that night, as though to kind of call him out on all of this. And it works, honestly. He is terrified, and Rial confronts him about it.
You saw it.
At this point, Bull can't deny it anymore and decides that all of their old belongings are cursed and must be burned. So much so that he rips the necklace from Rial's throat, the one that was made from the beads of Nyagak's doll, and despite her begging him, throws it into the fire along with everything else they managed to bring with them from Sudan. Rial is left completely in shock at this. It is like an incredibly cruel gesture by Bull at this point. And Rial, basically by calling him a coward and saying that she has no reason to be afraid of ghosts. The Apeth tells her to be afraid of him. And it does seem like he's becoming more and more controlling and unstable, and we kind of start to wonder, is the Night Witch right? Like, is the twist going to be that Bull is actually the villain of the film, and he's going to be, like, terrorizing Rial? The cinematography in this portion is really striking. The camera dollies backwards to reveal Bull eating at a table, alone in, like, a sea of red fog. And at first, this again kind of feels like it's meant to be symbolic, like just a visual representation of like his loneliness and isolation, not to be taken literally. But then the scene doesn't end. Bull looks up and realizes he's in this strange place, and suddenly it's not just a metaphorical visual anymore. There are many times that the story moves kind of in and out of dreams without signaling that a dream is beginning or ending. And the fact that they manage this without confusing the viewer is really fantastic writing. They keep it consistent by using a different visual language. So whenever Bull has a dream, the visuals, the lighting, the camera work, it's all way more abstract. The camera perspective is less likely to be motivated by another character in every shot and tends to become a distant observer, at least part of the time. The visual language becomes less grounded and less literal in reality, whereas reality and later on in the film, like direct memories, are shot much more straightforward. In the sea of fog, the dead begin to come for him. But then he wakes up. Most movies would cut to the next scene after the character wakes up from the dream to show you that they're kind of safe now, but they're still very haunted by the past, right? Not this movie. This one laughs at your expectations. Bull isn't safe just because he woke up. He's still being hunted. These moments with Bull are what makes this a horror film rather than like a straight drama. The hauntings have been increasing in intensity throughout the film. The scenes are very heavy with jump scares, but not a single one of them feels cheap or unearned. The movie does a really fantastic job like building up that tension like achingly slowly, only to hit you with a jump scare that is slightly off from what you were expecting, which I feel is honestly one of the best ways to create effective jump scares. Look at this moment, for example. Bull turns on the light and the ghost vanishes. Wet footprints cross the floor, moving closer and closer. Bull hesitantly goes to turn off the lights, and nothing. He looks around, and there it is. It's not complex, but it's just slightly off from what you were anticipating, which makes it jarring enough to be effective. It's almost always obvious when a film is building up for like a good jump scare. And those scares only land well if it can play a bit with your expectations. It is very hard to totally shock an audience, but it's much easier to give them something just a little bit unexpected, just a little into left field. This film does that from the very beginning. In the first haunting scene, Bull is reaching deep into the wall. There are strange noises, and we're expecting something to happen. But not that. And then, there's the jump scare that I was expecting. Nyagak torments and almost kills him in this scene. She's the only ghost that appears in the light and the dark, so he knows he's not really safe from her, whatever he does. He is becoming more desperate the more violent these ghosts are getting. So desperate that he even asks for a new house.
You want to live somewhere else?
So Bull is just crashing out. And Rial is done. She tells Bull she is going to leave with or without him, which, again, is wild when you consider the fact that going back is a literal death sentence. And then this happens.
How quickly you forget our daughter.
Was sick.
And then Bull locks her in the house. Seems maybe the Apeth was right about him. He breaks the locks and jimmies all the windows shut so that she can't leave. She can't leave to go back to Sudan. His crash out is not done yet, though. He decides that he is going to summon the Apeth and end this all himself. And as you can imagine, this does not go well for Bull. He does successfully summon the Apeth.
You stole it.
From who? What did he do?
No matter where you go, I follow.
So it's not the house that's haunted, it's Bull. So it doesn't matter if he gets a new house anyway. The Apeth says that he wants Bull's life for Nyagak, but he refuses and realizes that the Apeth can't actually touch him physically. But the witch is very quick to show Bull that while it may not be able to harm him physically, it certainly can make his life a living hell. Bro has severe PTSD and obviously a ton of guilt around his daughter's death, and the Apeth uses that against him mercilessly. A direct allegory to the struggle of PTSD. Something doesn't have to cause you physical injury to honestly utterly ruin your life. Riel manages to pry open a window to escape, and she climbs out and runs into a bright, sunny courtyard. Up until this point, the color palette has been very drab. Gray, rainy England. The landscape has been all concrete and featureless buildings, but this courtyard is bright. Not just the sun, but the colors. It's painted red. This is not England. Rial is somehow back home in Sudan. She finds herself in a lovely room full of singing women who all hug and greet her with like effusive love and friendship. And we understand a little more now why Rial wants to go back home. She had an amazing, thriving community who cared about her deeply. This whole scene is like a complete 180 from the lonely and hostile environment that she's been living in England. But obviously, she is dreaming. Her dream is more grounded than Bull's have been. She knows immediately that she's dreaming, but she still only has one main goal.
Tortio.
Nga,
Yandia.
nga.
When Bull appears in the dream, he's looking for Rial, which is to be expected, but he doesn't seem confused on where he is, which you'd expect if he chased her out of the house and into sunny Sudan, right? And he's wearing completely different clothes. He's got a backpack. We have now moved from a dream into a more literal flashback, as much as a flashback can be literal, right? Rial climbs out of a cabinet in the same room that she had just been in, and when Bull finds her, she's like completely shell shocked. The camera pans and reveals that the room is littered with the corpses of all of her friends. And the juxtaposition in this scene is so heartbreaking. To go immediately from a group of women singing and loving life to this, it shows us directly why they ran. It's no longer an ephemeral off camera danger. Bull's desperation to assimilate makes more sense. The jarring juxtaposition is so raw. Rial's grief and the desire to go home. It's not really a desire to get sent back to Sudan. It's a desire to go back to a time and a place where she was happy and had a community. But that place doesn't exist anymore. They hide on a rooftop from armed men, and when they finally find a bus taking people away from danger, it is full. They're only taking parents with children. Rial and Bull don't have any children, but Bull sees Nyagak. And when gunshots start and a jeep is bearing down on them, in a panic, Bull snatches her up and pretends she is their daughter to get them onto the bus. And then that bus pulls away from the violence, and we watch her actual mother scream for her daughter and desperately chase the bus until she disappears in the dust that the vehicle has kicked up. Rial watches completely stone faced. She does not try to stop what's happening. Then they're on a boat. Many people, including Nyagak, are thrown overboard. Bull saves Rial, but Nyagak is left to drown. I'll be honest, I did not see this coming at all. In this video, I've been making a point to highlight the moments that hinted at this, right? So maybe you already guessed that twist. But it's not as obvious when watching the film. I could certainly tell that there was something weird around Nyagak. Obviously we didn't have the full picture, but the idea that they kidnapped her in a moment of panic to survive just... The Apeth speaks from the old woman in front of Rial and says that it can give her what she wants, if Rial gives it Bull's flesh. Bull, real current day Bull, finds Rial right outside the window, unconscious in the rain, and brings her back inside the house. Though interestingly, she's not wet. Don't know what that means. And after all of this, Bull seems really resigned. Rial is just shook. In her grief and guilt, she had convinced herself that Nyagak was actually her daughter, and now she's staring reality in the face. She was complicit. She may not have grabbed the kid, but she didn't stop Bull. She got on that bus, so she let him do that. We don't really know if she would have given him to the Apeth, because he kind of beats her to it. Bull has had time to reflect and has decided that he should make up for his sins and to save Nyagak by giving up himself. His monologue here is just gut-wrenching. The survivor's guilt is obviously just tearing him apart inside.
I should have tried harder. I should have saved her.
The Apeth comes, and I thought it would eat him, but no, it shoves its hand into his wound and worms around up his arm, trying to turn him into a skin suit, which is horrifying. And this is kind of a turning point, not kind of, this is a turning point for Rial. She listens to his pain. She sees her dead friends and family, Nyagak, and she finally decides that it's time to say goodbye to them. This is Rial accepting that her home is gone. This time and place that she wants to go back to is gone. Nyagak is gone. Rial says goodbye to all of it, and Nyagak pulls away from her. This is acceptance. This is forgiveness, forgiving Bull for choices that he made for their survival, and I think also acceptance of her own part in those choices. And then she takes the knife and she slits the Apeth's throat. The next day, the English caseworkers, or whatever they're called, come to the house, and they make sure to show us that this was not all just symbolic. There is a large hole in the kitchen floor where the Apeth had crawled from, covered up by a rug. This is the first time the movie shows anything that proves the creature wasn't just a PTSD nightmare. They were actually being haunted. There was an actual Apeth. This was a thing, right? The ending shots of this film are very powerful. We see not only Nyagak, but all of the others that they left behind. The people who died, their friends and family who they'll never see again. People who could have just as easily been Rial and Bull if they had not been very honestly lucky. It really does this movie a disservice to say it's about any like one or two things. I can't really say it's about grief or PTSD or survivor's guilt because it is about all of those things and like a lot more. This is a powerful film that not only scares the shit out of you, but shows the hardship of asylum seekers, the mental and emotional trauma of being forced out of your home by violence. Like, I was originally going to focus on how this movie crafted amazing jump scares because it really does. They're really great. It has so many, and every single one of them is fantastic. But the more I watched the film while writing the script, the more I realized that just focusing on that would also be a disservice to this film. His house crafts horror so expertly that by the end, you'll actually be shocked to realize that you just sat through a drama about Sudanese refugees, with one of the better plot twists of recent memory, in my opinion. It is a perfect example of why perspective matters, why we should constantly be seeking out stories from every community and not being satisfied with treating middle class white people stories as like the default. There is so much more that the world has to offer in the terms of stories. And so many of these we haven't had the opportunity to hear before because it just hasn't been available. But we live in a time now where these stories are being told more often. So I really encourage you to watch this film and go look for more stories like this. Look for more stories from people who are different than you, that don't look like you, or that have, different life experiences than you, from different cultures, all of these things. It will improve not only you as a person, but it will improve your movie going experience, honestly, because you're going to see many new things, many new stories, many new tropes that you haven't had the opportunity to experience before. And that can always lead to an awesome experience. So do that thing. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being patient. I know it's been a year since the last time I uploaded. If you like this, hit subscribe, and there will be more movies coming soon. Thanks and have a great one.